Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, I want to start with a kind of mindset shift.
Okay.
Usually when we look at any big new idea, especially in government, we ask, what good will this do? It's the optimist's question.
It's the brochure question, isn't it? You focus on the best case scenario.
Exactly. But today, we're taking that approach and throwing it out the window. We've got this fascinating piece of analysis in front of us titled Stress Testing the Ethical Guardians. And it argues that when you're building something important, what will it do is, well, it's the amateur question. The real question, the engineering question is, how is this going to fail?
Which sounds cynical, but it's not. It's actually how you build things that last. You don't ask if a bridge will stand on a calm day. You ask what happens in a hurricane. You stress test it.
And that is exactly our mission today. The context here is a proposal to reform or replace the House of Lords with a new body. Let's call it a Council of Guardians.
Right, a body focused on ethics, long-term thinking, constitutional standards.
But instead of debating the pros, we're going to try and break it. The source material lays out 5 specific failure modes, 5 ways this whole dream could just, go completely wrong.
And I think that's the right approach. It's not about killing the idea. It's asking, okay, the risks are real. Can we design a structure that actually survives them?
So that's the plan. We're going to walk through all 5: irrelevance, capture, preachiness, veto by stealth, and in when. And this last one, outsourcing of conscience. And honestly, I'm pretty skeptical. This feels like a minefield.
It definitely is. Let's see if the proposed safeguards hold up.
All right, let's jump right in. Failure mode number 1, the risk of irrelevance.
Yes. The dusty shelf problem.
The dusty shelf problem. That's perfect. This feels like the most obvious one to me. An advisory body produces a brilliant report, and it just gets ignored.
It's the classic fate, isn't it?
Take me the picture. How does this actually play out?
So you've set up your council. You've appointed these brilliant, thoughtful people.
The best of the best.
And they spend 6 months looking at, a controversial new surveillance law. They write this beautiful 200-page report. It's got footnotes, citations. It probably mentions Kant.
Sounds very impressive.
It is. They hand it to the House of Commons, to the actual politicians with the power, and the government says, "Thank you so much, this is wonderful," pats them on the head.
And then just passes the law exactly as they were going to anyway.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, these guardians, they don't have a veto. They can't stop anything. So why would a politician who's worried about the next election actually care?
Right. So doesn't the whole concept fall apart right there?
Yeah.
If they could be ignored, what is the point of it all?
Well, this is where the source gives us our first real aha moment. It flips the whole argument around.
How so?
It points out that right now, in our current system, ethical concerns are being ignored all the time, but they're being drowned out.
Drowned out by what?
By political noise. Right now, if the House of Lords pushes back, the government can just say, oh, they're just unelected elites, or they're playing partisan games. The actual ethical point gets lost in all that static.
So they have a convenient excuse. They don't have to engage with the real argument. They could just attack the messenger.
Precisely. Now, the goal of this new body isn't to force the government to obey. That would be undemocratic. The elected House has to have the final say.
Okay.
The goal is to change how the advice gets ignored.
What does that even mean? How do you ignore something differently?
Think of it this way. An inspector can't force you to fix a crack in your foundation. But if they write a formal public report saying, this foundation is unsafe, you can't pretend you didn't know anymore.
Right. The deniability is gone. The liability shifts.
Exactly. The source calls it visibility. If this council produces a clear, simple report saying, this law violates this norm, and the government does it anyway, that act of ignoring becomes a conscious, deliberate political choice.
I see. So right now, a politician can muddy the waters, but in this system, they'd have to stand up and say, yes, we see the ethical problem, and we're choosing to do it anyway.
Yes. It turns ignoring from something passive into something active. It has a cost. You can still run the red light, but we guarantee the camera is going to flash.
Okay, I can buy that. Visibility is a kind of power. But that leads to the second failure mode, which scares me a lot more. The risk of capture.
The watchdogs becoming the lapdogs.
Exactly. We've seen it a million times. You set up an independent body, and the prime minister just stuffs it with their friends and donors. And suddenly, it's not an ethical guardian. It's just the ethical wing of the ruling party.
Or maybe even worse, it gets captured by a single ideology. You get a whole room of people who think exactly the same way, and they just rubber stamp their own side's ideas.
It's just an echo chamber.
Yeah.
So how on earth do you prevent that? Because we'll appoint good people
Mhm.
is not a defense.
No, relying on good chaps is a terrible strategy. The source is really clear on this. You can't rely on virtue. You have to rely on structure.
Okay, so what are the structural defenses?
A few things have to work together. First, and this is simple, but it's so powerful, long, non-renewable terms.
Why is the non-renewable part the key?
It's about incentives. If I appoint you to a job and you know you need me to reappoint you in a few years, you're going to be very careful not to accept me, right?
Yeah, I'm on a leash.
You are. But if you have one, say, 15-year term and that's it, you can never be reappointed.
Then you don't care what they think anymore.
You're untouchable. You have zero incentive to curry favor. You can burn bridges because you never have to cross them again. It liberates your judgment.
That makes a lot of sense. What else?
Staggered appointments. This is crucial. You never want a new government to come in and replace the entire committee at once. It has to be a slow trickle. Maybe 1 or 2 new members a year.
So a prime minister would have to be in power for, what, a decade or more to really stack the whole thing?
Exactly. It makes capture slow and difficult. And then there's the idea in the source of pluralism over consensus.
Okay, that sounds a bit academic. What does that mean in practice?
We often try to fill committees with consensus candidates, people everyone agrees on. But those people are often, well, they're boring. They're safe. They don't rock the boat.
They're the people who have never really annoyed anyone important.
Right. Pluralism means you intentionally want people who disagree. You want different appointment routes from different parts of society. You want the room to be messy and argumentative by design.
So if a government tries to sneak in a bunch of their allies, it's really obvious because everyone else is so different.
And that gets to the main takeaway here. The source admits these rules don't make capture impossible. A determined government might still find a way. But, and I love this phrase, these rules ensure that abuse leaves fingerprints.
Dave's fingerprints, that's good.
It means you can't do it quietly. You have to break norms, make a big public scene. It turns a silent takeover into a noisy scandal. And making corruption noisy is one of the best defenses you have.
Okay, so they're hard to fire, and they're not all friends. But that brings us straight to failure mode number 3. If you put a bunch of professional ethicists in a room, don't they just become insufferable?
The risk of preachiness.
Yes. I mean, nobody likes being lectured. If this body starts acting like some kind of high court of morality, handing down these grand verdicts, the public will switch off.
And politicians will just tune them out. If they're seen as arrogant or theatrical, they lose all legitimacy instantly.
The source material uses a great phrase for the solution here. It says the body needs to rediscover the value of dullness.
Yes. Dullness is a superpower.
Which sounds counterintuitive, but explain why being dull is a constitutional virtue.
Think about the difference between a sermon and a safety inspection report. A sermon is emotional, it's judgmental. A safety inspection is clinical, it's technical.
Boring.
It's boring. And this body needs to sound like the safety inspector, not this law is evil and you should be ashamed.
But more like, this law contradicts Section 4 of the Act in these 3 specific ways.
Precisely. Dry. Technical. The moment they start using emotional language, they've failed. They need to sound like careful bureaucrats, not righteous activists.
It's like a mechanic saying, if you keep driving on these tires, they will blow out, versus a parent yelling, you're being irresponsible.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It is much harder to argue with the mechanic. Their goal isn't to shame people, it's to make the consequences of their choices, and I'm quoting here. Harder to pretend weren't understood.
Which brings us to a totally different danger. Failure mode 4.
Right.
What if they become too powerful? The veto by stealth.
Right. The mission creep problem.
Because even if they don't have a formal veto, power's a funny thing. If they start framing every single political disagreement as a catastrophic ethical failure, they could just paralyze the government.
Imagine that. Every time the government wants to change a tax rate, this body says that's unconstitutional. It weaponizes ethics to stop normal politics.
It would just shut down debate. Well, the Guardian said it's immoral, so I guess we can't do it.
And that would be deeply corrosive to democracy. We elect politicians to make those hard choices. If an unelected body starts making them by default, the system has failed.
So how do you stop that? Where's the guardrail?
It all comes down to absolute clarity of role. The source is very, very firm on this. The Guardian's job is not to decide what should happen.
Okay, so what is their job?
Their job is to surface the trade-offs. And there's a really profound line in the text about this. It says, disagreement isn't a failure of ethics, it's the raw material of it.
The raw material. I like that. What does it mean?
It means that in a healthy society, we are supposed to disagree on values. You might prioritize liberty, I might prioritize security. Neither of us is unethical.
We just have different priorities.
Exactly. The Guardian's job isn't to say security is better. Their job is to say, okay, if you choose this policy for security, here is the exact price you will pay in liberty. Are you comfortable with that trade?
So they're not the referee calling fouls. They're the cockpits. They're the slow motion replay. They just show everyone what happened.
That's it. They illuminate the costs, they make the trade-offs visible, but they never pick the winner. The moment they do, they've overstepped.
Okay, we're on to the last one. Failure mode number 5. And this one feels the most subtle, the most psychological. It's the outsourcing of conscience.
This is a tricky one, but I think it might be one of the most dangerous in the long term.
Explain the risk here. The idea is that if you create one special body for ethics, everyone else just stops thinking about it.
Right. It's a box-ticking mentality. A politician thinks, oh, did the Guardians sign off on this bill? Yes. Great. I'll vote for it. They stop exercising their own moral judgment.
It's like they're just, outsourcing their own conscience. It lets them off the hook.
It creates a moral hazard. It's not my job to worry about the ethics. That's their department.
So how do you possibly fight that? That just feels like human nature.
Well, the rebuttal from the source is that this body could actually do the opposite. It could raise the bar for politicians, not lower it.
How? If they're just checking a box.
Because of that visibility we talked about at the start. Without this body, a politician can vote for a bad law and later claim, oh, I didn't realize it would have that effect.
The plausible deniability.
Yeah.
The convenient blind spot.
Exactly. But if the Guardians have just published a very clear report detailing exactly what damage that law will do,
then that excuse is gone.
the blind spot is gone. If that report exists and you vote for the law anyway, you are now committing a conscious act. You can't say you didn't know.
I see. So it doesn't take the weight off your shoulders. It actually puts more on because now you're acting with full knowledge of the consequences.
It forces complicity. You can no longer be negligent. You have to be deliberate.
Wow. Okay. We have really put this thing through a stress test. Irrelevance, capture, preachiness, veto by stealth, outsourcing conscience. That's a lot of ways for an institution to fail.
It is. And the source is clear. None of these are theoretical. They've all happened somewhere.
Which almost makes you think, why bother? It seems too risky. Why not just stick with the messy system we already have?
But that's where the author lands the final punch, the uncomfortable truth at the end of the analysis.
Okay. What is it?
The author points out that almost all of these failure modes ethics being ignored, politicized, captured, treated as a box-ticking exercise, they're already happening right now.
Wait, so the argument is we're already living in the failure mode.
Exactly. Is our current system captured? Well, appointments are political. Is it irrelevant? Ethical arguments get ignored all the time. Do politicians outsource their conscience? They vote on party lines without reading bills constantly.
So we have all the problems, but none of the structure. We have the mess, but we don't have the visibility.
We are failing quietly in the shadows. This reform doesn't promise a perfect system. It just promises a system where the failures are harder to hide.
It's the difference between a house with hidden rot behind the walls and a house where all the cracks are painted bright red.
The red paint doesn't fix the crack, but it makes damn sure you can't pretend it isn't there.
And that forces a conversation.
That makes sense. Okay, so the source leaves us with one final provocative thought. A bit of a cliffhanger. It asks, now that we've stress-tested the theory and seen the risks, has anyone actually tried this before?
Or would we be flying completely blind?
And that's the question I want to leave you with. We always assume the current system is the safe option because it's familiar. But what if it's just failing in ways we've all gotten so used to that we don't even notice anymore?
Maybe the status quo is just the failure mode we've learned to live with.
That's a thought that is going to stick with me. Thanks for taking this deep dive.
Keep thinking.